Welcome to Postcards, a brief look at people, places, the arts and curiosities from around the world. On today's program, the recreation of the World Fair in Paris, a century on. Japanese modern artist Yayoi Kusama exhibits her latest works at the Serpentine. In the auction houses, classic Art Deco goes on sale for the first time at Christie's. Our feature today looks at the blend of art, science and technology at the Surrey Research Park. And young Europeans escape the rat race to volunteer in developing countries. But first up, Rolly Bain is a church victor who spends much of his time clowning round. The Reverend is just one example of a British person who has taken a very different approach to a very traditional way of life. Peter Faulkner is a coracle maker who's been making circular reed boats for the past few years. He's an example of a craftsman whose profession is slowly dying. These men are just two of 46 Britons who have been chosen by artists of the Royal Society of Portrait Painters to depict the story of British workers and their lifestyles at a new exhibition. Daphne Todd, president of the Royal Society of Portrait Painters, explained that to commemorate the change in the millennium, a cross-section of the population will be painted rather than the usual great and the good. Then this would redress the balance for future generations. The subjects were chosen for their faces, personalities or place in the community. They include every sort of occupation, from primary teaching to stripping. Trevor Tasker, who cleans out sewage tanks, was eventually persuaded to pose by artist Daphne Todd. Expressing some initial scepticism, these lifesavers were more than pleased with their portraits on seeing the finished product. The artists hope the portraits will be added to every year to give a chronicle of British life. The Royal Academy of the Arts was host to a spectacular and daring exhibition which brought together some of the world's greatest art treasures. The exhibition, 1900 Art at the Crossroads, is a painstaking recreation of the vast art festival mounted at the World Fair in Paris to mark the end of the 19th century. A century on, it brings together works by the modern masters Degas, Cézanne, Rodin and Klimt, and works by the so-called official artists of the day. Curators spend more than 3 years tracking down the works from the original Exposition Universal, and today's $1.6 million exhibition contains 250 works by 100 artists from 28 countries. The period involved marks the birth of the modernist movement, which changed the face of the art world forever. One of the many highlights is the renowned Bridge over the Water Lily Pond by Claude Monet. The exhibition is a chronological slice of the years 1897 to 1903 and is organised into sections: portraits, landscapes, rural and urban scenes, enabling visitors to explore the underlying themes of the period, such as nationalism, Arcadian nostalgia, fairy tale and dream. It also contains work by many artists who are enormously important in their day but are now less familiar. Audiences in London and New York are going to discover some spectacular painters like Spaniard Sorolla, Italian Boldini and Anglo-American Sargent, who painted in a very old master virtuoso way with rapid brushstrokes. The exhibition, which is a must for art lovers the world over, next moves to New York. The Serpentine Gallery in central London is the home to one of the most exciting modern artists. Yayoi Kusama from Japan has been ahead of the game for more than 40 years. This is her first major exhibition in London. She invented pop art before it became fashionable. And she has worked in all types of media, influencing American pop art and the latest Brit art. Kusama worked in film, wrote novels, painted watercolours and worked in sculptures. She did not recognise any limits. Her intent was to make art wherever she went and to really focus on her four main obsessions: food, sex, dots and nets, all of which appear in this exhibition. It shows her creativity and versatility. It's a chance to put her whole work into an historical perspective. The centrepiece of the exhibition is Driving Image from the mid-60s. It combines painting, sculpture and performance. This is one of the rare occasions that has all been assembled together. The whole ensemble rests on a bed of macaroni. But Yayoi Kusama is also able to work in traditional media, like oil painting. This dresser and chair, enmeshed in nets, recalls the nightmare of Miss Havisham's wedding preparations frozen in time. While the nightmare fecundity of sleeping stamens is an alarming piece of work. But there's also a gentler side to her art. This piece, called An Infinity Love for Mirrors, is almost a throwback to the 60s and shows a wide range of this most influential of modern artists. Emerging from wartime austerity, European society in the so-called Roaring Twenties was in mood for celebration. From glass and ceramics to architecture and clothing, a flamboyant style known as Art Deco emerged. It faded by the time the Second World War broke out, but Art Deco is today seeing a strong revival. Riding this tide, Christie's auction house recently held its first sale of classic Art Deco pieces. Art Deco was the dominant style in both design and architecture in the 1920s and 1930s. It's a movement that emanated from France in the post-war years and is characterised by geometric patterns, by a strong colour palette and a preoccupation with speed and movement. Also typical was the elongated female forms, which are often portrayed in exotic poses or exotic costumes. The sleekness of these figures suggests fast travel in the elegant cars of the 20s and 30s and the louche lifestyle enjoyed by the wealthy. For although the interwar years in Europe were a time of creeping economic depression, hardship and looming totalitarianism, the leisured classes at least were able to escape from political and economic gloom and indulge in a newfound love of the exotic, outrageous and highly coloured. Art Nouveau and Cubist ideas in painting, the Bauhaus movement in architecture, and decorative ideas from American Indian and ancient Egyptian culture, all these can be seen in Art Deco. A warning from the experts though, this early 1930s piano in chrome and red leather, or a dining table with shiny U-shaped support, are unlikely to sit well with more modern furnishings. Art Deco, it seems, can seriously change the look of your home. It all began here at Cambridge University 30 years ago. Around this powerhouse of Britain's intellectual life, companies set up home. Many of them grew out of research already being done at the university, giving practical business application to the pure science going on behind the ivy-clad college walls. The phenomenon quickly spread to other campuses like Heriot Watt near Edinburgh, a university specialising in science and technology. By the middle of the 90s, some were predicting that science parks, primarily suited to small high-tech companies, had had their day. But the present drive in Britain towards a knowledge-based economy looks like giving the idea a fresh boost. Now there's a comfortable marriage of art, science and technology. The town of Guildford is home to Surrey University and the neighbouring Surrey Research Park. This is one of the most rapidly expanding science parks in the country, with 83 companies based here. It attracts businesses which aren't capital intensive, ideally suited to the creative endeavours of graphic and software designers. Come next year, young and not so young computer game addicts could be in the grip of this new craze. High-quality computer images and complex ideas combine to create a wholly virtual world. It's called black and white, and players can choose to be good or evil. The world they are in and the creatures in it will change accordingly.
How about this?
It's the latest idea to come from the imaginative brain of Peter Molyneux, a legend in the new but rapidly expanding world of computer leisure. 10 years ago, he and a friend chose Surrey Research Park as the base for their computer games company, Bulldog. They started at the Technology Centre, principally because it was a small office space which was reasonably flexible and could be taken on for a short time. They needed access to a university to tap into the pool of talented students, and they needed access to libraries. Eventually, the company outgrew the space available on the park. Buyout flooded in, and Peter and his partner sold up for $32 million US after just 4 years in business. Peter decided to start a new company, Lionhead Studios, based back on the park. His legendary success has drawn over a dozen other companies down to Guildford. It's now become a national hub of the computer game industry. The Technology Centre, where Peter Molyneux started out, is the seedbed for companies employing just 1 or 2 people. As they grow, they can move out into the larger premises around the park. A new extension to this incubator centre for embryo businesses will open up space for 32 more companies to set up here. The IDBS company started off in the Technology Centre in 1996 with a staff of 11 and has now grown out onto the park proper with 56 employees. Its work is designing and installing computer software specific to pharmaceutical companies. Proximity to the university and the flexibility offered by the research park were the key factors in deciding to move here from London. In fact, Surrey University is the landowner, and the rents from the park bring in annual income of some $5.6 million US, funding the development of university departments and a level of expertise which in turn stimulates new companies to grow. The 3 separate universities in Manchester have given birth to one of the country's biggest science parks. Development agency grants have stimulated such parks in the industrial cities of northern England to replace the steel and textile mills of old. IPEC was started by research engineers at the university and is now developing ultrasound machines for the power industry to check for faults in cables. Its links with the university are still strong, helping give students practical experience and to recruit fresh talent. For some countries, the UK is something of a role model. Visiting science and industry park managers from China have been comparing their own experiences with the British model of science parks. They like the idea that staff work not only at the science park, but also at the university as lecturers, sharing resources and promoting research and development between the 2 facilities. During their mission to Manchester, the Chinese signed an agreement for the UK Science Park Association to train managers of science and industry parks throughout China. Britain's science parks aren't just full of computer software designers and engineers, though. Synetics is a company carrying out clinical trials for drug companies. This lady is having a bone density scan before entering a trial for a drug combating osteoporosis. The large medical school and teaching hospitals in Manchester have attracted several companies to the science park. Osur is an Icelandic-based company which has developed a method for making sockets rapidly for artificial limbs without the need for taking plaster casts. Manchester has been the base for clinically testing the device. And American outfit RTI has only recently picked Manchester as a European base for its research work on the economic impact of new drugs for the pharmaceutical industry. In another recent move, Manchester has teamed up with nearby Sheffield, as well as large science parks in 2 other northern cities, to market their respective expertise to companies abroad. More such regional cooperation, rather than competition, looks to be the formula of success for the science park phenomenon, and associated benefits to tourism. It's one of those must-see exhibitions at London's Royal Academy. Jean-Simeon Chardin, an illiterate 18th century artist who painted humble domestic objects and turned them into visual poetry, was certainly different. For Chardin, a scullery maid captured the moment of stillness in the everyday life of a simple Parisian household. This bowl of wild strawberries glows with all the timeless intensity of a 17th century Dutch masterpiece. And these everyday objects have a poetry of their own. According to Marcel Proust, Chardin taught us to find the things themselves beautiful to behold. He had an enormous influence on French painters. This still life could be straight out of Cézanne. This vase of flowers is on loan from Scotland's National Gallery in Edinburgh. Artists like Manet, Gauguin and Van Gogh adored Chardin. His appeal is also linked to his essential Frenchness. The aesthetic of the everyday made him a cult figure, albeit mainly in France, and the current travelling exhibition should introduce him to a wider audience. Even his portraits have an intimacy and a stillness. A portrait of a jeweller's son watching a top. Or this wonderful study of a little girl with a shuttlecock. The exhibition, celebrating the 300th anniversary of the artist's birth, will move from London to New York. Young, highly paid professionals grafting their way up the corporate ladder. Not the kind of people you might expect to take a few years off to work for a pittance in some of the poorest countries on earth. But Voluntary Service Overseas, the British charity providing young volunteers to work in developing countries, has seen a big jump in the number of business people and managers applying to do just that. Research shows they have what is called consumer blues. They're fed up with the stress and spend lifestyle in the UK, and they want to work overseas in a job they believe in and something that gives them more time and more space to reassess their values. Developing countries like Bangladesh, though, are not interested in young Europeans just wanting to escape the rat race. But management consultant Sarah Ireland is an example of how the modern skills of young Western professionals can help businesses in developing countries get on in the competitive global economy. She's teaching how to think ahead and plan long term. Good healthcare is vital in Bangladesh, a country where 1 in 10 babies dies before it reaches its first birthday. VSO volunteer Richard Butterworth is not a nurse or doctor, but an accountant. He's helping the hospital keep better track of its finances. It's not just a desk job either. Richard assists a rural development program by evaluating a loan scheme that's designed to help small businesses get on their feet. 50 years since its founding, the number of skilled volunteers coming forward shows no sign of diminishing. There's a lot to be taken into account when designing the right outfit for that very special occasion, be it escorting the monarch or entertaining the public. It's down to the UK's Defence Clothing and Textile Agency to make sure military clothing is glamorous, practical and, most importantly of all, durable. Before any garment is produced in quantity, a prototype is made to ensure everyone likes the design. Alongside the brand new garments produced here, old favourites like the Royal Navy's double-breasted uniform are given a new lease of life. There have been some weighty challenges over the years, not least the quest to find a synthetic alternative to the Guards' traditional bear skin. It's no easy task given the vagaries of the British weather.
Yeah. Very glamorous, isn't it? How does it feel? I know it's the wrong side.
Designers have also been put to the test by the changing role of women in the services. One of the biggest challenges has been the request for maternity uniforms, translating the traditions of a uniform into a shape that is still recognisable but also functional and comfortable. As the British Armed Forces advance into a new era, the garment gurus will be right beside them, meeting whatever challenges are laid in front of them, cutting their cloth to meet the customers' ever-changing needs. Known as the Green Oscars, hopefuls from 30 countries across the world gathered in the Japanese city of Hamamatsu to take part in the world's top environmental competition. This year it was the small English country town of Bury St Edmunds in Surrey which walked away with a prize for the best small town. They said the best thing about the contest was learning just how much more they could achieve. Whilst proud of their 24% recycling rate, they're mindful that some countries are achieving up to 70%. The award for the best environmentally sensitive practices, including reducing household waste and cutting car traffic, went to the large London city borough of Wandsworth. On any given day, they have 2 million commuters coming through the borough. The host city of Hamamatsu won the event last year. During the Second World War, it was devastated by American bombing. Only 3 of its local platanus trees were left standing. But these were revived by residents and became a symbol of their determination to rebuild their city. The judges are looking for evidence of saving precious heritage, restricting chemical pollution, inventive recycling schemes, and a commitment to the environment at a grassroots level. The next competition will be held in Washington, DC. And that's all for today. Join us again next time for a postcard look at interesting people, places and the arts.